Hi, this is John Grenham here again with the latest installment in the video series relating to Irish ancestors, both the website, johngrenham.com, and the Irish ancestors themselves, of course. So today I'm going to talk about Irish directories as a resource for researching our ancestors. So let's get stuck straight in. Right, here we are at the home page. The first thing I should say is that the best description of how directories work and what they are, the overview, comes once again in the free, can I say that again? The free section where you can have a look at the records. Again, this is based on the book Tracing Your Irish Ancestors, and then some. It adds more up-to-date information, and it also gives more illustrations. What it does is, as I tend to do, is divide things up into pigeonholes so that they're easy to remember. You may have noticed this. If you're still awake back there at the back of the room, wake up. Okay. Anyway, the three basic categories of directory are Dublin directories, countrywide directories, and then provincial directories. And what I mean by those, Dublin directories is pretty self-explanatory. Dublin was the place that had the most directories earliest on, and so they're in a category of their own. And also Dublin directories tend to spread out outside Dublin, because then, as now, in the past as in the present, Dubliners tend to think that Dublin and Ireland are the same thing. So Dublin directories are kind of a symptom of that. The countrywide directories are ones that cover the entire country, obviously, and tend to do it broken down by province, and then by county, and then by town. And then you have provincial directories. These are ones published locally, dealing with, for example, Sligo or Limerick or Wexford. They tend to be published once off, or maybe two or three, unlike the other categories. So they're more ephemeral, they're harder to come across, and quite useful because of that. The first thing about all three categories, of course, is that they almost all concern urban areas. Okay, like newspapers, the aim was to produce a publication that people would buy. So you produced it to cover an area where there were enough people that you were listing, and enough people living that they would be interested in buying it. And Dublin was obviously the first place. So there are Dublin directories from the mid-18th century. This is an example of one of the earliest ones from 1783, Wilson's Directory. And you can see it's just a list of merchants and traders. So again, who are these useful for? They're useful for anybody who was in commerce in Dublin, and as time went on, in other urban areas as well. They do give addresses, which can be very useful. So you have Thomas Dodd, coachmaker, 52 Jervis Street. And you do need to be aware. I mean, these are 18th century prints, so you have glass spelt as with the F, a double S. The first S will be printed as an F, and so on. I mean, those lists of merchants and traders eventually began to grow into other occupations, so solicitors, barristers, people employed by the government, doctors, and they were eventually all subsumed into something called Pettigrew and Oulton, Pettigrew and Oulton's Dublin Directory, which began to give street lists. And the street lists are the most useful part of the Dublin directories, and of the Belfast and Cork directories as well. So we'll come back to those in a second. That's Dublin directories, an overview. And you can see at the bottom of this page here, there's a guide to what is and isn't online. Some of it is on Ask About Ireland on the Griffiths Valuation homepage. Some of it is on Find My Past. I'm going to have a look at the ancestry section, just to give you an idea of what the main run of directories actually look like. This is Ireland City and Regional Directories, 1836 to 1947. The vast majority of these are Thom's Directory. So Thom's was published from 1844 on. It includes house by house, street by street listings of who lived where, as well as the alphabetical lists, as well as the merchants and traders and so on. So let's just have a look at it. 1840, you can see it was published every year. So it's very useful in giving this sort of time lapse of who lived where, who was moving around the city. If somebody vanishes from an address, it's prima facie evidence for a death, perhaps. You can follow merchants and traders as the business goes through families and so on. So it's that ongoing time lapse effect that's really useful. They don't have a complete, so you see there's a gap, 1848, 49, but they're pretty good, especially for the 19th century. Let's have a look at the 1847 one and just show you what it looks like. That's the okay. I want to show you the general index to start off with. As I say, the thing that people know about Thom's is the street directory. It is the most useful part of it, but obviously that only applies to Dublin. One of the things, its full name, you can see the full title is Thom's Irish Almanac and Official Directory. It's not Thom's Dublin Almanac and Official Directory. So you have lists of the constabulary of County Armagh, the fairs, the deputy lieutenants, you have lists of clergy, you have lists of doctors, you have all sorts of wonderful mix and gather of stuff in here. This thing is about 800, 900 pages. So it's a vast work, and it was republished every year to try and make people buy it every year. And this general index is well worth combing through if you're interested in anything outside Dublin. Let's have a look at the street directory just to, this is an example of the street directory. It's alphabetical for the city of Dublin by initial name. You can see, so Stephen's Green, Stephen's Lane, Stephen's Place, Stephen's Street. And if you zoom in, say Stephen's Green West, which would be quite a good address, you have Patterson, the dressmaker, Henry Law, the solicitor, Mrs. H. Madden, Edward Cook, saddler and harness maker, so on. So, and that's, you have the number of the house along here. You can see as well an interesting part of it is that this number here that's £70 sterling. So that is the valuation of the building that they're occupying. So they're quite pricey. If we come down to Strand Street, you'll see there's £16 and £40, and we'll come right down the social scale here. Mary Rice Turner in a £10 house there on Strand Street, and you have where the streets intersect and so on. So this matches very nicely with the Ordnance Survey maps. You can actually pick out who is where in what house by using this street by street directories. Okay, so that's Thom's, and you can see again that going through it year by year by year is a way of following who was living where, how long they were living there for, and so on. This can also be a way of linking to the parishes. So you have a particular street, you know a location in Dublin, you know where the nearest church must be, so you look there for your records. So that's Thom's in essence. The most use, this is quite awkward using, even though you can see the images are superb. The best way to use Thom's is to have the actual volumes in front of you, to dip into the Dublin Street Directory, to go from Store Street or Strand Street in 1847 to 1848 to 1849. It's quite cumbersome to do that online. Dublin City Library and Archive Reading Room is the only place I know of that has a full run of these things on open shelves that you can go and browse to your heart's content. Of course, it's closed at the moment for the pandemic, but that won't last forever. So if you can't get to Dublin City Library and Archives, I think probably the best collection is here on Ansell Street. Okay, let's move on from the Dublin directories to the Countrywide. One of the problems, these are Pigott's are the first. The 1826, 1820, 1826, and then 1848. These cover the entire island of Ireland. They break it down by province. So Connaught, Munster, Leinster, and Ulster. And within that, by county, and within that alphabetically by town. So there is a classification that goes all the way down. The early ones are quite terse. They don't cover nearly as much as the later ones. Let's have a look at the 1894 Slaters. You can see Leinster, and it's alphabetical by town. So you have Dunganstown, Dungarvan, Dunkerrin, Dunfirth. In this case, one of the things, this is a relatively new introduction in 1894. It gives the main farmers in the area listed alphabetically. So that's quite useful as a sort of an in-between the 1901 census and Griffiths in the 1850s. And that's in the 1890s for Slater's directory. Because the number of towns covered varies from edition to edition, one of the things I do on this website is provide a link to what directories are covered within towns within civil parish. I'll give you an example of how that works. Let's have a look at the civil parishes. Let's pick Kildare. And we pick Kildare Parish because it contains Kildare Town. And you can see that the summary of research sources gives you 5 directories. So if you click on that, this is what you see. You see organized, you give a description of each of them. If it's online, there's a link to it. I'll go back to that in a second. And then over here on the right, you have a list of the towns covered. So in 1881, these towns in County Kildare are covered. So it's done by county there. And in 1870, these towns. You can see there are more in 1870 than there are later on in 1881. In 1856, there are even more. So even though that you would think that as it goes on, it gets more and more coverage, that's not always the case. Let's show you how they're online. These Pickett and Slater are on a free website called falcharoat.com. And this is the 1824 for Pickett. This is for Leinster. And here's Kildare. And we'll open it. And in you go. You can see this is not transcribed. These are purely PDFs. And you can see this is Kildare Town. It's pretty basic. You got a list of merchants and traders, etc. So shopkeepers and traders, bakers, publicans, carpenters. These were the equivalent of what used to be the yellow pages. If you're looking for a weaver or a carpenter or a blacksmith, and the idea was you had this directory in front of you and you could look it up. It gives you also a potted history of the place. Useful. This is before Lewis's topographical dictionary, so it's quite a useful resource. If you have somebody who was in business in a provincial town, Slaters, Piggotts are very, very useful. They're free online. You have to root around a bit, but there's a link there if you're interested in that. Okay, let's go back to where we were. Those are the countrywide directories. The least useful, in some ways, are the provincial directories. So these are the ones that are hardest to find. It's for provincial towns, though the people of Cork won't thank me for saying that about the real capital of Ireland, but they are later than the Dublin directories. They take their lead to some extent from the Dublin directories. They provide merchants and traders lists, useful for somebody looking for a tradesman, looking for somebody to do something. And they provide street by street listings of who lived where. The best ones are for the next biggest towns after Dublin, so Belfast, but only from about the mid-19th century on, because Belfast really didn't become a city until then. It only started to grow with the Industrial Revolution, the late Industrial Revolution. Cork from the early 19th century, because Cork was always wonderful. And both of those are really well served online. There is, on the Belfast ones are here on the Northern Ireland Public Record Office website. So, and they're a superb search interface. So again, there are links to it from my site. You can get to it, and you can see, you can pick what directory you want to search. You can pick keyword, Hamilton. It's a pretty keyword in most northern directories. So in 1865, and search, and here you have all the mentions of Hamilton in Belfast and Ulster Provincial Directory for 1865. You can then restrict it if you want to, you only want to see the Hamiltons in Carrickmacross. And there you are, Hamiltons in Carrickmacross, and you have the the Hamiltons in Carrickmacross, Castleblaney. There you are. Hamilton MacMath, so it's actually a forename rather than a surname, of Thornford House in Carrickmacross. So you can see the Prony have really set this up very, very nicely. It's intuitive, it's easy to use, it's very, very responsive. Let's just go back. The equivalent for Cork is Cork Past and Present, which is run by Cork City and County Libraries. And again, there's a link straight into it. Again, they are PDFs. You can download them in multiple formats, but you can see that they have, first of all, they have specific Cork City directories right from 1753. And then as things go on, they've extracted the bits for Cork City and County from Slater's, and there are specific later ones, Henry and Coughlin's for Cork, Wilkie's Cork City Directory, and so on. So it's a wonderful collection, and it is something I end up using regularly. The other large city is Limerick, and again, Limerick are very well served with Limerick Local Studies. So they're all there. They're all available for you. Okay. One of the things about these, I think I mentioned this, is that they're for smaller towns like Dundalk or Sligo or Galway. There were local directories published. They weren't. They would have been published maybe in 1860, and then maybe another edition in 1884, but they didn't have the audience to support the sort of regular, as we've seen for Belfast, like Dublin, it's pretty much annual, the Belfast and Ulster directory from the 1850s on. Tom's and Pettigrew and Oltons from the 1830s, and even earlier the Triple Almanac. These provincial directories came out occasionally, and because of that, they tended to get thrown out. They tended not to survive. The one place they did survive was in Trinity College Library, because it was a copyright library from the start of copyright. So from about the mid-19th century on, they have a superb collection of these ephemeral directories, because people were obliged to lodge a copy with them. And a company that has a connection with Trinity, which is Archive CD Books, Enaclan, has digitized an awful lot of the hard to find ones from the Trinity collection, and those are available. Archive CD Books doesn't seem to be operating anymore, but the Irish Family History Centre website provides access to any of the PDFs that they created when they were operating as archive CD-ROMs, and you can see here you have the full lot of them all available for sale. Well worth a browse. Finally, if your head is spinning from this, good, you've been paying attention. There is an easy way to find out if there is something for your area, where it is, if it's paying, and it's on Shane Wilson's website. Shane is swilson.info. Again, there's a link on my own website. It's well worth checking out. Again, it's very intuitive. What he's done is categorize them all by location. So, for example, for Clare, okay, you get a complete list of all the online directories. This is online purely for areas in Clare. So, Clare Library, you can see here, has the bits from Bassett's Limerick City and County for the county of Clare. So they've extracted the bits from Clare. He gives you a guide to exactly what's where. If it's on, for example, Find My Past, Henry and Coughlin's, the Irish Family History Centre, I mentioned that as well. If it's on the Limerick City Local Studies website, if it's transcribed in the US, so on and so forth. Books.google.com also a resource. So he's very good at bringing these all together and giving you. It's a slightly different way of looking at than I have, but it does give you an overview, and I have to say I end up using it myself quite regularly. Finally, one last way of getting access to this, similar to Shane, is through the counties listing on my browse section. So Antrim, you come down to directories, and you get a list. This is a chronological list of the directories. This is unlike Shane's listing of what's online. This is a listing, the whole lot. So if they're in the National Library, if they're if I know anywhere they've been published, I'll give you the details of where the library they're in. So it's not only online. This includes the online, but it covers more. Okay, I hope I've given you a sense of how useful these can be. I hope that I haven't totally put you off researching your Irish ancestors. I wish you luck. Do come visit the website. Bye for now.